You think losing the ability to feel happy means you're depressed or broken. Maslow discovered something more nuanced in his research on human motivation and psychological health. He found that the inability to experience pleasure or satisfaction stems from multiple distinct sources depending on your developmental stage. And misidentifying which source is operating leads to interventions that don't work or even make things worse. These psychologically struggling people weren't all experiencing the same depression. They were experiencing different types of motivational breakdowns that looked similar from outside but required completely different responses. The most important part? Maslow identified that anhedonia, the technical term for inability to feel pleasure, can indicate you're stuck in deficiency needs, that you've satisfied deficiency needs but haven't developed growth motivation, that you're experiencing clinical depression requiring treatment, or that you're in existential crisis from living below your potential. This isn't about one simple answer. This is about understanding which type of motivational breakdown you're experiencing and what response actually addresses your specific pattern. And distinguishing between these patterns prevents both inadequate self-help when you need professional treatment and unnecessary pathologizing when you need developmental guidance. Not every person who can't feel happy is experiencing the same psychological phenomenon. There's a critical difference between anhedonia caused by clinical depression, anhedonia from unmet basic needs, anhedonia from successfully meeting deficiency needs but not developing growth needs, and anhedonia from living inauthentically or below your potential. Maslow observed that these produce identical symptoms. Nothing brings satisfaction. Activities that used to bring pleasure feel empty. Life feels flat and meaningless. But they originate from completely different psychological sources and require opposite interventions. Some people can't feel happy because they have neurobiological depression requiring medical treatment. Others can't feel happy because basic needs for security or connection aren't met. Still others can't feel happy because they've achieved material success but haven't developed meaning and purpose. The pattern matters enormously because treating clinical depression with self-actualization advice is inadequate, while treating existential emptiness with only medication misses the actual problem. What appears as the same inability to feel joy reflects entirely different causes requiring different responses. Real understanding requires examining all possible sources, rather than assuming one explanation fits all anhedonia. In this video, I'm going to reveal what Maslow's framework explains about the different sources of anhedonia and life dissatisfaction, how to identify which pattern you're experiencing, and what response actually addresses each cause. You'll discover why some people need therapy or medication, others need to meet basic needs, others need to develop growth motivation, and why one-size-fits-all approaches to unhappiness usually fail. These are insights from motivational psychology, clinical psychology, and humanistic psychology about the multiple meanings of "nothing makes me happy anymore." By the end, you'll understand how to assess what's actually causing your anhedonia and what intervention serves your specific situation. This isn't a video claiming Maslow's hierarchy will cure depression or that understanding motivation solves all unhappiness. This is psychology explaining that can't feel happy has multiple distinct causes requiring honest diagnosis before appropriate response becomes clear. This video is for people who've lost capacity for joy and want to understand why, without either dismissing serious problems that need treatment or pathologizing developmental challenges that need growth. If nothing brings satisfaction anymore, if activities that used to bring pleasure feel empty, if you're going through motions of life without actually feeling alive, you're about to understand the multiple possible sources and how to identify yours. Critical warning. If you're experiencing suicidal thoughts, severe depression, or inability to function, you need professional evaluation immediately. This content provides framework but cannot replace clinical assessment. If you're ready for honest examination of what might be causing your anhedonia, keep watching. Think about the last time something genuinely made you happy, not distracted you, not numbed you, not briefly entertained you, but actually created that feeling of satisfaction, joy, or aliveness. For many people experiencing anhedonia, that memory is distant or absent. Activities that used to bring pleasure, hobbies, socializing, achievements, entertainment, now feel empty. You're doing things but not feeling anything. This is a defining feature of anhedonia, and it's one of the most distressing psychological experiences because it feels like you're broken in some fundamental way. Maslow understood that human motivation is hierarchical and that satisfaction comes from successfully pursuing and meeting needs appropriate to your developmental level. When you can't feel happy, something in that motivational system has broken down, but where the breakdown is occurring determines what will fix it. The psychological weight of anhedonia is profound because life without pleasure or satisfaction feels pointless. You continue functioning from obligation or habit, but the internal experience that makes life worth living has disappeared. Understanding that this can have multiple sources, some requiring medical intervention, others requiring life changes, is essential for finding the actual solution rather than applying interventions that don't match your cause. Maslow's hierarchy provides one framework for understanding anhedonia, but it must be integrated with clinical psychology for a complete picture. At the most basic level, anhedonia can result from clinical depression, a neurobiological condition affecting brain chemistry and neural circuits that process reward and pleasure. This isn't about motivation or needs. It's about brain function. The neuroscientist Helen Mayberg studied depression and found that specific brain regions involved in reward processing show abnormal activity in depressed patients. Anhedonia in clinical depression often includes pervasive inability to feel pleasure across all domains. Nothing brings joy, not even things that should. Physical symptoms like sleep disturbance and appetite changes, thoughts of worthlessness or hopelessness, and lack of response to positive events. Good things happen, but you can't feel good about them. If this describes your experience, you likely have clinical depression requiring professional treatment, therapy, medication, or both. Maslow's hierarchy doesn't address neurobiological depression. Medical intervention does. The psychiatrist Peter Kramer documented that some people's depression responds primarily to medication, indicating that while life circumstances matter, there's a biological component that must be addressed medically. Assuming all anhedonia is motivational or developmental, when some is neurobiological, prevents people from getting treatment that would actually help. But Maslow's framework becomes relevant for understanding non-clinical sources of anhedonia, and research suggests that a significant portion of life dissatisfaction isn't clinical depression, but motivational and developmental problems. At Maslow's lower hierarchy levels, anhedonia can result from unmet basic needs. If you lack reliable food, shelter, safety, or you're in chronic physical pain, your capacity for pleasure is genuinely limited because your system is focused on survival. The psychologist Roy Baumeister studied self-regulation and found that people under chronic stress or threat have depleted capacity for positive emotion. Their systems are in threat response mode, which inhibits reward processing. If you're experiencing anhedonia while also struggling with basic security, financial instability, unsafe living situation, chronic illness, abusive relationship, your inability to feel happy likely reflects that your system is correctly prioritizing survival over pleasure. The solution isn't therapy or self-actualization work. It's addressing the actual threats and meeting basic needs. At the love and belonging level, anhedonia can result from social isolation, loneliness, or lack of meaningful connection. The neuroscientist John Cacioppo studied loneliness and found it affects brain reward systems. Chronically lonely people show reduced response to pleasant stimuli. Humans are social mammals who need connection for psychological health. If you're socially isolated, whether from circumstances, social anxiety, or relationship loss, your anhedonia may reflect unmet belonging needs. Activities don't bring joy partly because you're experiencing them alone, and humans are wired to find meaning in shared experience. The solution involves building or repairing social connections, not just pursuing individual pleasure. At the esteem level, anhedonia can result from chronic failure, lack of achievement, or feeling incompetent and inadequate. If you've experienced repeated failures, if you're stuck in situations where you can't develop mastery, if you feel perpetually inadequate, your reward system may have learned that effort doesn't lead to success. The psychologist Martin Seligman studied learned helplessness. When organisms learn that their actions don't affect outcomes, they stop trying and show depression-like symptoms. If your anhedonia is accompanied by feelings of incompetence and belief that nothing you do matters, you may be experiencing learned helplessness from unmet esteem needs. The solution involves creating contexts where you can experience competence and success, rebuilding belief that your actions matter. But here's where Maslow's observations become most relevant for contemporary anhedonia. He identified that many people in affluent societies experience dissatisfaction not from unmet basic needs, but from having met basic needs without developing growth motivation. This is what he called existential vacuum, or the pathologies that emerge when deficiency needs are satisfied but growth needs aren't engaged. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl studied this phenomenon extensively, finding that many people experiencing life dissatisfaction had material security, stable relationships, and external success, but felt empty because they lacked meaning and purpose. He called this existential frustration, the specific suffering that comes from living without clear purpose or meaning. Maslow documented that self-actualized people, those who'd moved beyond deficiency needs into growth motivation, experience life satisfaction not from pleasure or comfort, but from meaningful engagement with challenges that develop their potential. When people successfully meet basic needs but don't develop growth motivation, they experience a peculiar form of dissatisfaction. They have everything they thought they wanted but feel empty. This isn't clinical depression. It's developmental stagnation. Activities don't bring satisfaction because the activities are oriented toward deficiency needs already met. Pursuing more money when you have enough doesn't create satisfaction. Pursuing more status when your esteem is secure doesn't fulfill. Consuming entertainment when you're comfortable doesn't provide meaning. The solution isn't meeting more deficiency needs or treating depression. It's developing growth motivation through meaningful challenges, authentic self-expression, and contribution beyond yourself. The philosopher Landon Botten wrote about what he calls status anxiety, and found that many people in affluent societies are pursuing goals that, even if achieved, won't provide satisfaction because they're deficiency-based goals and people who've already met those deficiencies. They're trying to fill needs that are already filled, and it doesn't work. But there's another source of anhedonia Maslow identified: living inauthentically or below your potential. He found that people who were living lives that contradicted their actual values, who were suppressing authentic self-expression, or who were capable of much more than they were doing, experienced specific dissatisfaction he called betrayal of self. You can have all needs met externally, but if you're living life that doesn't reflect who you actually are, nothing brings genuine satisfaction because your life itself is wrong. Not wrong morally, but wrong as fit between your authentic nature and how you're living. This creates anhedonia because pleasurable activities are occur within life structure that fundamentally doesn't work. It's like trying to enjoy dessert while sitting in wrong size chair. The dessert might be objectively pleasant, but the overall experience is uncomfortable. The solution isn't pursuing different pleasures. It's restructuring your life toward authenticity. The psychologist Sheldon Kopp wrote that many people in therapy are suffering not from mental illness, but from living lives that betray their actual nature, and no amount of therapy techniques will resolve the dissatisfaction until they make the life changes that bring them into alignment with themselves. This is perhaps the most challenging source of anhedonia to address because it often requires major life changes, career shifts, relationship changes, value realignments, rather than treatment or simple interventions. The transformation that occurs when you accurately identify which source is causing your anhedonia is that you can pursue appropriate response rather than generic interventions that might not address your actual problem. Remember that confusion about why nothing brings satisfaction anymore, that trying multiple approaches that don't help, that sense that something is fundamentally wrong, but not knowing what. When you identify your actual source, clarity emerges. If you recognize clinical depression pattern, pervasive across all domains, with physical symptoms and negative cognition, you can pursue medical evaluation and treatment without shame about needing medication. Your anhedonia isn't moral failure or lack of willpower. It's brain chemistry requiring medical intervention. If you recognize unmet basic needs pattern, struggling with safety, security, health, or connection, you can focus on meeting those actual needs rather than pursuing self-actualization while your foundation is unstable. Your anhedonia isn't mysterious. It's your system correctly signaling that basic needs require attention. If you recognize existential vacuum pattern, material security but lack of meaning or purpose, you can develop growth motivation rather than pursuing more what you already have enough of. Your anhedonia isn't depression requiring medication. It's developmental signal that you need engagement beyond comfort and security. If you recognize inauthenticity pattern, living life that contradicts your actual values or nature, You can examine what needs to change structurally rather than trying to feel better within wrong life. Your anhedonia is information that your life doesn't fit who you are. Your next steps become clear based on pattern. Clinical depression requires professional evaluation and likely medication/therapy. Unmet basic needs require practical steps to build security and connection. Existential vacuum requires finding meaningful challenges and purpose beyond yourself. Inauthenticity requires life restructuring toward alignment with actual values and nature. Now here's where understanding becomes practically useful through specific assessment questions that help identify your pattern. Ask yourself, do I have physical symptoms alongside anhedonia, sleep disturbance, appetite changes, fatigue, difficulty concentrating? Physical symptoms suggest possible clinical depression requiring medical evaluation. Do I have basic security, reliable food, shelter, safety, financial stability, physical health? Lack of basic security suggests your anhedonia reflects realistic threat response. Can I identify specific situations or activities that still bring some positive feeling, or is everything completely flat? Some positive response suggests non-clinical pattern. Complete flatness across all domains suggests possible clinical depression. Do I have meaningful connections, people I feel close to, relationships where I'm known and accepted? Lack of connection suggests anhedonia from unmet belonging needs. Have I achieved what I thought I wanted but feel empty? Achievement without satisfaction suggests existential vacuum. You met deficiency needs but haven't developed growth motivation. Am I living according to my actual values? Or am I living life that contradicts what matters to me? Life values contradiction suggests inauthenticity as source. Do I think about suicide or feel that life isn't worth living? Suicidal thoughts require immediate professional help regardless of source. Do I have periods where I feel okay, or is the flatness constant? Constant flatness suggests more serious clinical issue. Periodic flatness might be situational or developmental. Your honest answers reveal pattern. Multiple patterns can coexist. You might have clinical depression plus existential vacuum or unmet needs plus inauthenticity. But identify which factors are operating prevents applying wrong interventions.